There has never been a better time to be a footy content creator, and I genuinely do not say that with arrogance in the slightest. It is that mainstream footy media have shot themselves in the foot so badly when it comes to the way that they're running their shows, because it's not the fact that there are too many footy shows. Whilst that's a worthwhile debate, I actually think the problem is more the same people are on too many shows. There's not enough diversification of guests or topics, and I thought I could genuinely go a month of the footy season before the way that a topic went through the mainstream footy media cycle that did my head in. It didn't take a month. We're here, and the way that topics have been covered around Melbourne are doing my head in. Because let's be honest, the mainstream footy media cycle goes like this. Show A, whatever show it is, brings a topic forward. Show B brings the same topic forward, but spends 50% of the time on the topic and 50% of the time reacting to what show A said. And then you have show C, who bring up the exact same topic, just with a different panel, or with some similar panel members, I should say. And then they spend 30% of the time, or 20% of the time, I should say, on the topic, 40% on what show B said, and 40% on what show A said. And then what do you get out of it as a footy fan? Not a lot. So when BT said that there's too many footy shows, is right and wrong. The reason why podcasts and YouTube works is that you've got the ability to non-diversify your creators who are hopefully bringing you diversified topics. And Melbourne, a really interesting topic coming out of the game against North. And for some reason, it's all about the era and not the two most obvious questions. Should Melbourne rebuild? And what's the future for Simon Goodwin? So allow me to do mainstream footy media's job for them. So let's start with why David King is in the thumbnail, and on Fireball Monday, I think it's called, or just Fireball with Kane Corns. Now, whatever you think of Corns and Kingy, I love them two together, and I really do like them as analysts. I do think that Kane is being used a little bit too much, but go earn that bag, dude. I would do the exact same thing, to be honest, so I got no qualm with that in the slightest. I think those two together is some of the best footy media of the week. It really is. I love the way they bounce off each other. But in talking about Melbourne in their review-style show, Kingy said, amongst other things, that the era is over for Melbourne and their aura of invincibility has lifted. And all I need to say is, what? And I thought this was just a weird offhanded comment that's just the same as a lot of other offhanded comments. I make a lot of them as well. I'm not on my moral high horse here or even attacking Kingy. But on Twitter, I even went to Channel 7's page, or Channel 7's post came up that said, is the era over for Melbourne with this photo here? And as I put on Twitter, and as I'm putting out here now, how is an era in footy one flag and two straight set exits? And if you want to include 2018 in there, sure. How is an era one flag, one prelim, and two straight set exits? Look at Sydney in 2005. No one refers to them as an era. And they played in, I think, 3 final series, 2 grand finals, and a flag. So how's that not an era, but the Melbourne one is? And this aura of invincibility around Melbourne is like not the case in the slightest. Yes, in 21 they were frightening. And Melbourne fans, I am not trying to put you down here. You deserve to enjoy, love, rewatch, fonder, fawn over, whatever the hell you want to do around the 21 flag. You deserve it. You suffered through so much pain. I don't even need to explain to you. That third quarter would be on repeat in my house if I had have gone through what you guys did as a footy fan. I'm not taking that away from you, and I'm not trying to disrespect Melbourne here. The shot that I've got at the media is one of my favourite quotes. Someone or something, and I've included or a club there, not living up to your expectations is more on you than it is on them. The only people that are upset at Melbourne for some reason are those that thought they would be in the 8. Now, I didn't have Melbourne in my 8. They still might get there, by the way, but coming away from that, number one, we should be talking about North more than we should the D's, but that's, a whole nother problem, and I'm a hypocrite because I'm talking about Melbourne in this video. But also, it's so true. If you expected Melbourne to be a top 8 side and they put that out, that's not on Melbourne, that's on you, right? I am angry currently at the Adelaide Crows because I had them in my top 4 last year. It looks like I was a year too early. But that's on the expectation I put on the Crows, not on the Crows doing what they're doing now, right? If you expect your child to be a genius and they turn out to be intelligent and you think of them as a failure, you're the asshole. That's the way this shit works. If you thought Melbourne were going to be good, you should be saying that you're wrong, not, well, Melbourne aren't what we think they are. No, not what we think. You thought. Accountability is key. You got that wrong. I'm probably wrong on Freo. I'm not giving up on them just yet. They lose the derby, and holy shit, I will. But if you can't put your hand up and go, Melbourne just aren't as good as I thought they were, then you've got a problem. Because there is content around the D's to be had. It's not clickbaity, it's not social media worthy, and it's probably why I'm never going to end up on these shows. Can't do the whole superficial thing, as you can probably tell by the videos, especially that I've been putting out this year. I just can't really do that. So let's do the topics that they should have done, and let's start with the rebuild side of things. So the good thing about the Ds at the moment is they have 24 players who are 24 or younger, which is awesome. They do have 14 players who are 29 plus, and we'll talk about them a little bit later on. But in terms of the youth, in terms of rebuild mode, they're actually in pretty good shape compared to some other teams. You think of like what Richmond had to do when they lost all of their experienced guys and get the kids in. Melbourne aren't exactly there, which is good. And the other good part is that they're over, say, 27s, I suppose, or 29s if you want to use that 14-plus group, are, again, not exactly horrible, and you do have some movable pieces there. Let's just start with the old guys that doesn't really matter if they're on the list next year or not, and I kind of say that with love, but we're going to try and be realistic here. Leading that pack is the oldest person on their list, Jake Melksham, who I don't really have a problem if they keep around for experience sake, but is he going to be the answer? Yeah, who knows? I'm probably going to go with no, but you still need to have some older guys there. But Tom Campbell, yeah, his ruck depth, I understand that, but we'll talk more about the ruck situation a little bit later on. Shane McAdams, just unfortunate with injuries. Jack Billings just hasn't lived up to the hype. Joel Smith, as we know, his problems off the field. And Marty Hoare, again, who I feel sorry for. He's just one of a gluttony of half-backs that can't be healthy for Melbourne at the moment. So the questions will need to be asked around those players. The really good news in terms of young depth and young talent that we can give a massive tick to, or a big tick to, I suppose, led by Jake Bowie or Bowie. I'm sick of both of them being used. But one of my favourite redheads in the competition, you got Jacob Van Rooyen, who I still think is going to be a number 2 forward and not a number 1. They still need to chase that. Geez, Taylor Walker in a Jack Darling type role would have been good for Melbourne this year. Judd McVie, Caleb Windsor, and Xavier Lindsay at this point in time. There are more names to add to that list, by the way, and I will talk about them a little bit later on. But in terms of front and centre, they're the guys that you are looking for. Someone like Trent Rivers is a little bit older than that group, so just keep that in mind before you comment and going, you not watch Trent Rivers play footy, Daz? Yes, I have, and I'm a big fan. In terms of the youth that deserve a question mark for a gluttony of reasons, we're going to start with Colton Tolstrup there just because of injuries, but I think he's going to be a very good player and one of their half-forward flanks of the future, or on a wing he could go. Kynan Brown, we just need more from him in terms of games and hopefully form. Matty Jefferson, who you know I'm a fan of and will contribute to the spine players get longer time, that's fine. Moniz Wakefield just did his ACL, which is a massive shame. Haven't seen enough from Blake Howes. Taj Woden is a moments guy. Jai Cully, who we haven't seen at the D's yet, but I was a big fan of when he got drafted in the mid-season draft. And Harry Sharp, who has shown some signs. I got no problem with any of those question marks. I'm not saying they need to get rid of any of those players. It's just more of a case of I would really love to see more of that crop. But again, we still haven't hit anything overridingly negative about the D's list yet. And what I think is a really good check of your youth is what would a best 18 of your young group look like? And how would it perform? Well, if we look at Melbourne's under 25 group and make a best 18 out of that, you're looking at Jake Bowie, Harrison Petty, Blake Howes, Trent Rivers, Jed Adams, who we haven't seen all that much, and Judd McVie as a backline. There is some quality there. Xavier Lindsay, Harvey Langford, and Harry Sharp as a wing line is scary good. Will Varel as a ruckman, who can also play a little bit forward, as we know. Well, you may not know, but that's fine. Jai Cully and Caleb Windsor. Now, I think Windsor, who's played a little bit of wing, half-back, he can also fit on a half-back flank, but I needed to fit him into this side, so I'll just do what the All-Australian selectors do and just shove him somewhere. You've got Cade Chandler, Matt Jefferson, Tom Sparrow, Cozzy Pickett, who may not be there, and if he gets traded for a pick or two, brilliant. You can just add more youth in, that's fine. Jacob Van Rooyen, and Charlie Spargo. Whatever you think about a lot of the guys on the list, the fact that they are fitting positional needs is a tick, and if they need to be replaced down the line, they can be. By the time the majority of this group get better and better, then you've got the ability to get free agents in who may fit those holes if you've got them, and you'll be able to bring in guys via trade. I don't think Melbourne are going to do anything on the free agency front for anyone of that 26 and younger group. Could they go down the path of getting an experienced player? Of course they can. I think the ship has sailed on Tex being at the Ds, and there's not really a whole lot of older key forwards that they could try and get down there. So that might be a little bit of a problem. We shall see. But in terms of the older experienced players, we may not know who's available yet. So we'll wait and see. But that already is a good place to start from. So if Melbourne are going to go into a more draft-heavy rebuild mode, they're not doing it from nothing. They won't have to do the Richmond model of 8 youngsters. I'm not saying that Richmond are doing it in a bad way. This is just going to be a different way of doing it. And that is going to need to have a lot of internal development. And that might be where Simon Goodwin may not be the guy forward. And that's not, again, an attack on Goody. But what you don't want to do is keep a premiership coach around too long, meander, and then end up nowhere, right? I'm worried that's what the Bulldogs could be doing with Bevo, but we'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later on. And also, the Dogs are going really well at the moment. So maybe I could be wrong about this. Maybe. But in terms of list holes with that young group, so not with the group that they've got now, that young group, you're probably looking at the key defender, the ruck, and then midfield depth, right? Yes, you've still got the big three in the midfield, Trent Rivers, Judd McVie, Harvey Langford. These guys are rolling through the midfield as well. They are probably a midfielder short. Could they go after a Zach Butters in free agency and make the last 4 minutes of this completely useless? Maybe. I don't really know how much that will help from an out-of-the-square place to go. I have no idea what their salary cap is like, but there it is. The interesting thing with the ruck outside of Gawn, which is why they might keep Campbell later on, is that they just don't have anything else. Yes, they've got Will Varell, but I don't think they're going to go out on the town and try to go after a ruckman who's not Luke Jackson, and it's highly unlikely that he is going to be moved from Freo anyway. There also aren't a lot of other ruckmen in the competition that are going to be on the move. Ivan Soldo stands out as a guy that can't get a game. Ned Reeves, if you want him. Melbourne, sure. Lachlan McAndrew, depending on what Adelaide are going to want, may be the way to go. Mark Pittonet, maybe, again, but it's just going to be depth waiting for Gawn to retire, right? Braden Preuss did that, and he's out of the league before Gawn retired. So you've got a little bit of a problem there. What's going to be really interesting is that key defender spot, because the answer to this could be coming in the draft or could be taken away from them. Former Melbourne ruckman Jeff White, he has a son, Kalani. I believe that's how it's pronounced. Now, unlike Jeff, Kalani is not a ruckman. He is a key defender. 196 centimetres tall and rated one of the better key defenders in this draft. Now, you would think father-son. He's actually also tied to Gold Coast's academy, which means he gets to play dibs, much like Nick Blakey did with the choice between Sydney and North Melbourne, or Bailey Scott, who chose between Gold Coast and North Melbourne. I'm sure there are other examples as well, but I'm just going to roll with those two and keep on moving. Melbourne, I think, need to pitch to him the club really quickly. Now, May Lever, yes, you're going to be fourth in line because you've also got Harrison Petty, but those two boys, May especially, are not going to be around forever. So getting a bit of depth in there is going to be good. And at such a highly touted draft pick, even with the new draft concessions, meaning that Melbourne are going to have to pay more for him, I think it's still going to be a big benefit of drafting him and getting him in as quickly as possible. Or, of course, you could also draft another one, or we might be able to see more of Jed Adams. So that can be solved. The midfield can be solved. And the ruck, I mean, if Will Varell's not the answer, draft another one. Go to one in the mid-season draft if you've got a spot open. But ruck is the easiest to cover, to be perfectly honest. The amount of ruckmen that have come from other clubs is astounding. You know, Darcy Fort, for example, Mark Pittonet for Carlton, Darcy Cameron for Collingwood. You've got Luke Jackson for Freo, if you want to count him as the ruckman. Reece Stanley, who's come from another club. Jared Witts came from another club. Lloyd Meek came from another club. You know, it happens. Sweet and Soldo at Port Adelaide came from another club. Toby Nankervis came from another club. This is scary at this point in time. Brodie Grundy and Peter Laddams both came from another club, right? Scary. Matt Flynn at West Coast did the same thing. So that can be covered a little bit. Maybe it's not that big of a deal. I don't know. I don't think they need to go after like a ruck forward type. They just need a bona fide ruck in. There are plenty of ruck forwards in this draft though, so if you want to take a swing on one, probably not going to be that big of a deal. Not a lot of them are tied to academies or father-sons, which is a plus. If you do want to go after a key defender, the two that stand out for me would be Josh Worrell and Jack Payne. I know both of them are contracted, and if you are a fan of Adelaide or Brisbane, you probably hate that idea. This is not attacking you or your club. I think it's a compliment to those guys that they would be the ones you would go after. Maybe Darcy Gardner, try to get one of the Brisbane key defenders out of there. You're obviously not going to get Harris Andrews. It's worthy of a thought. That's all I'm saying. But overall, from a list point of view, their list is not terrible. So the question is, if they can get some off-field pieces right, is Simon Goodwin the man to lead them forward? And that becomes an interesting conversation, because the big word or the buzzword around the Ds at the moment, and has been for 12 months, is culture. The culture around Melbourne is, at this point in time from the outsider looking in, not great. Or, as I kind of used last year in a couple of videos, them vibes are bad. So, would sacking Simon Goodwin be the answer? Now, hard to know without more wins and losses, obviously, and his record post the flag is actually not that bad. And as we've said, 2 straight set exits, but they've gone through the dip. Didn't make finals last year, and if you think they're not making finals this year, then you're looking at 2 years without finals, 4 years without a finals victory. You know, what is that going to look like? As a Hawthorn fan, watching Alistair Clarkson from 2015 till effectively 21 win no finals during that time, or 2016, I should say, till 21, with 2 finals straight set exits, it took the Hawks too long to move on, and I completely understand why. Add in the fact that Simon Goodwin delivered their first flag since 64 and he is their only living premiership coach, I can kind of understand hanging on for too long. As I've often said that Bevo has at the Bulldogs, but there is a discussion around Bevo there that is going to take place in just a sec. If you look at the coaches, recent coaches that have had larger gaps between grand final appearances without getting the sack, you're looking at John Longmire, Chris Scott, and Bevo during that time. If you have a look at where those teams finished on the ladders between their grand finals, Geelong is just insane with one 10th placed finish and pretty much contended every other year after that. Sydney are the really interesting one that after back-to-back 6th place finishes post the 2016 grand final loss, ironically to Bevo, had a 15th, a 16th, and then rebounded into 6th spot. That is going to be what Melbourne are hoping for. Can you have a 2-year dip, if this is seen to be a 2-year dip, and rise back up the ladder? Now, obviously, Longmire didn't get back to premiership glory, but you can't say that in the last 2-3 years especially, that they haven't been contenders. 2 grand finals will tell you that they were. Those performances, not great, but I digress. The Doggies also had their 2-year dip and played finals every year after that, barring 23, but are the Dogs, or have the Dogs been perennial contenders? They won a flag from 7th and haven't finished top 4 under Luke Beveridge ever, but have those performances justified the Bulldogs' finishing spot? If you just look at ladder positions, and taking a flag out is dumb, I know, but Ken Hinkley has a better average ladder finishing position than Luke Beveridge does. One of them won a flag, one didn't. And Port Adelaide hung on to Hinkley too long, we know that. So the question is asked, Bevo is the perfect middleman here. Chris Scott is the idealistic. John Longmire is the so close, so far. What is Bevo? And then the question for Melbourne is, what is Goody at the end of this year? Is he going to rebound like Longmire did and push them back into contention? Can they do what Geelong did and contend for a long time? I think it's unlikely. Or is Goody going to be the new Bevo and get them just good enough, but not quite there? And especially when you consider Melbourne's ladder positions after the 2018 prelim, where they had the dip in 17, 20 they were 9th, unlucky to miss. They won the flag after finishing 1st, 2nd in 22 with a straight sets exit, the same as 4th in 23, 14th last year with a point differential of 62 after their first 2 games, although they were awesome against GWS, granted. In case you want to know who are the inexperienced coaching candidates that they could look at realistically, here are the names. Daniel G. and Syracusa and Ashley Hansen, who I think would be front of the queue. Jamie Graham, Adrian Hickmott, Troy Chaplin, who's won Assistant Coach of the Year, Stephen King, who did it for a bit at the Gold Coast, and Collingwood's Hayden Skipworth. These are the names that you often see in coaching interview panels, and unlike the rest of mainstream footy media, I don't actually see it as a big deal that these guys have missed out on jobs. Like, there's 18 of them in the league. It doesn't mean they're bad, they just might not have been the right fit. And if you want to go down the experienced coaching path, this is where it gets spicy, because you are looking at just guys who aren't currently at clubs, by the way. You are going to be looking at some unreal names. John Longmire, Adam Simpson, Nathan Buckley, Leon Cameron, Ken Hinkley, and Justin Lepich, depending on which one of those that you like. Now, personally, I'm a massive fan more than the others of the first two names on that list. I think Longmire is being pegged for the Tassie job, to be honest. Adam Simpson could be as well, but I don't think I've ever seen a better advertisement for your footy intellect and to take over a young group than what Adam Simpson has been doing on Fox. He is amazing, and on SENWA as well, just quietly. But he has been awesome. The way he explains the game, communicates, and makes it easy for us to understand. It is not a huge leap to suggest that a new game plan for a younger group would be easier to understand. And he would be number one on the list. Adam Simpson would be your number one guy you would go after, just because of what he's been able to do. And that's if John Longmire isn't available. I think he's going to take the Tassie job. And to be honest, outside of those other names on that list, I think Ken Hinkley's name's going to be thrown up, but not necessarily taking that job. Lepich unlikely, even though everywhere he goes, people rave about him. But you could be an amazing assistant coach without making it work as a head coach. I hope that's not happening to Vossi, by the way, but that's a whole nother thing. But Daniel Giansiracusa and Ash Hansen, you just hear amazing things about. Adrian Hickmott at the Hawks is doing great things. Troy Chaplin, you hear a lot of amazing things about. Stephen King, Hayden Skipworth, all those names that we mentioned earlier would all be worthy candidates. At this point in time, with the coaching candidate quality that is out there, it's a bad year for Simon Goodwin to have everything happening. And also, him talking about Max Gawn's mental health, where Max went on Mick Malloy's radio show and said it's actually not that big a deal mental health-wise, it's just a family illness. And I don't say just as in downplaying it. What he was saying is that things have escalated in the last few weeks, but Max admitted that he just got beaten on the day. So why Goody brought it up, I have no idea. I would hate it if my boss did that, but if Gawn forgives him, we all should too. I think that's a pretty fair statement to make. But that's the way Melbourne should have been covered. I'm not saying exactly the same way I have, but just talking about an era that has come to an end is just not the way to do a topic. And you can break those two questions down or however you want to do it. But in my opinion, breaking it down that way is a better experience in how you could make a footy show thrive. And if mainstream media aren't going to do that, I'll have a crack at it. So if you enjoyed the video, click the like button, subscribe to join the Daz Talks Footy family, community. By the time this video goes out, I will have done a round 3 against the odds post, so go and vote on which upset you think is going to happen. You guys voted for Sydney last week. That got up. Everyone is on the scoreboard, and it's been really fun to get involved with you guys, so go ahead and do that. Follow me on TikTok. I'm nearly at 1,000 followers on TikTok, which is nuts. We're over 5K on the channel. Things are going gangbusters, of which I'm really appreciative. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you are enjoying your week, and we have plenty of weekend content coming as we find out more about your club in round 3. Cheers.